My friends, every generation stands at the edge of a great threshold, but youth more than any other carries the archetype of the new dawn. Within you is the primordial fire of change, the spirit that does not accept a world merely as it is, but dares to imagine what it could be. Your smallest actions, your boldest dreams, your moments of courage. These are not isolated sparks. They are the seeds of movements, the beginning of transformations that ripple through humanity. You are not simply individuals wandering through history. You are the carriers of the collective unconscious forward, the ones who awaken forgotten archetypes and bring them into flesh. The world does not change through power alone. It changes when the youth embody meaning, when they choose to live not as echoes, but as voices. Every movement begins not with the crowd, not with applause, not with the recognition of the world, but with the inner fire of the self. That fire is ancient, primal, and yet uniquely yours. It is the voice within you that says, I cannot remain silent, I cannot remain small, I cannot betray what I know to be true. Jung taught us that the self is the totality of who we are, the union of the conscious life we see and the unconscious depths we often ignore. When the self stirs, when it awakens, it demands expression. Think about every revolution, every change that reshaped the human story. It did not begin with a million voices, it began with one person listening to their own. It began with the fire of authenticity. Someone who refused to conform to the lifeless patterns around them. The fire of the self cannot be imitated, and it cannot be extinguished by the doubts of others. It burns because it is rooted in truth. For the youth, this fire is especially strong. You have not yet been dulled by too many compromises. You have not yet surrendered fully to the world's cynicism. Inside you is the raw, untamed flame that dares to imagine what others call impossible. And when you honor that fire, when you allow it to guide your choices, shape your vision, and ignite your courage, you set into motion a force that others feel. They see your courage, and it awakens their own. They see your authenticity, and it gives them permission to be real. The fire of the self is contagious. One act of truth becomes an invitation for another. One voice lifted in integrity becomes the beginning of a chorus. The world does not change because someone tried to imitate a formula. It changes because someone dared to burn with their own light. And when youth recognize this, when you trust the inner flame rather than waiting for external approval, you carry the seed of a movement that no power can suppress. The shadow of the old must be confronted, for no movement is born without meeting resistance. Whenever youth rise to challenge the status quo, the weight of what has been, traditions hardened into dogma, systems built on fear, patterns rooted in greed, emerges like a great shadow standing in the way. This is not accidental. The Jung reminds us that every new birth awakens the old defenses. The psyche, like society, clings to the familiar even when the familiar is broken. The shadow represents all that has been repressed, ignored, or denied, and when the young reach for change, that shadow rears its head. You will see it in the voices that say, "It has always been this way." You will hear it in the cynicism that mocks vision, in the resistance that tries to reduce hope to naivety. You will even feel it within yourself. The doubt that whispers you are not strong enough, the fear that tells you to stay quiet, the inertia that seduces you back into comfort. The shadow is not only out there in society, it is also in here, within the inner world. But confronting the shadow is not about destroying it. It is about integrating it. Hatred cannot drive out hatred, nor can denial erase what has been buried. To confront the shadow of the old is to look at it with open eyes and steady courage. It is to say, yes, I see the fear, I see the prejudice, I see the wounds that history has left upon us. But I will not let them define the future. I will transform them. Youth carry the archetype of the warrior, and the true warrior does not flee from the shadow. The warrior enters the dark places, not to be consumed, but to bring back light. Every movement that has changed the world, every fight for justice, every demand for dignity, was powered by young men and women who confronted the old shadows of oppression, silence, and despair. And here lies the great paradox. The shadow is not only an obstacle, it is a teacher. It forces you to grow stronger, to clarify your vision, to deepen your resolve. By confronting it, you gain resilience. By naming it, you rob it of its hidden power. And by transforming it, you do not merely rebel against the old. You redeem it, you carry forward the wisdom while shedding the chains. The shadow of the old must be confronted, for without facing it, youth would only repeat the same patterns under a new name. But by meeting the shadow consciously, you open the door to true transformation. In that confrontation, the old is not simply destroyed, it is transfigured. And in that moment, the movement begins to carry not only rebellion, but renewal. Would you like me to now expand the third keynote? The archetype of the hero awakens in service to the greater whole. In the same way, the archetype of the hero awakens not in pursuit of self-glory, but in service to the greater whole. Too often we imagine the hero as a lone figure, standing above the crowd, celebrated for their individual brilliance. But in Jung's vision, the hero is never simply about personal triumph. It is an archetype of transformation, one that emerges when an individual dares to step beyond the narrow boundaries of the ego and align with something far greater than themselves. For the youth, this awakening is vital. Each of you carries the potential to be heroic, not because you will slay dragons or conquer empires, but because you are willing to carry responsibility that others fear, to speak truths that others silence, to give of yourself so that others may rise. True heroism is not about recognition, it is about sacrifice. It is about saying, my life, my gifts, my energy are not mine alone. They belong to the future. They belong to humanity. Every great movement in history was carried on the shoulders of such heroes, young people who put aside personal comfort to serve collective destiny. They were not perfect, and they were not without fear, but they recognized that the call of the hero is not about erasing fear. It is about moving through it with courage, because the cause is greater than the self. The hero's journey always begins with a threshold, the moment you realize that your life is tied to the lives of others, that your choices ripple out into the world. When this realization dawns, you begin to act differently. You no longer ask what benefits me, but instead, what serves the whole. This is when the archetype awakens fully, when your heart beats in rhythm with humanity's future. And here is the beauty: when the hero acts in service to the greater whole, others are drawn to the vision. Movements are never built on one person alone. They are born when one person's courage ignites courage in others, when one act of service becomes a spark that awakens the same archetype in the collective. The hero, therefore, is not simply a solitary figure. He or she is the midwife of a shared awakening. Youth, you are called to this path. Not every one of you will be known. Not every one of you will be remembered by name, but every one of you can embody the hero by serving something larger. Justice, peace, healing the earth itself. When you serve the whole, you align yourself with a force that transcends time and place. In that service, you do not lose yourself. You find the truest version of yourself. The archetype of the hero awakens when you step beyond the ego's small desires and carry the mantle of collective destiny. And when enough young heroes awaken together, a movement is born. Not for power, not for domination, but for the renewal of life itself. Symbols become bridges of transformation because they carry a power far deeper than mere words or actions. They touch the soul, stirring something within us that reason alone cannot awaken. Jung reminds us that humanity does not live by logic alone. We live by images, by symbols that reach into the collective unconscious and bind us together across generations. A movement that lacks symbols remains fragile, but one that learns to speak in the language of the soul can endure for centuries. Consider the banners carried in revolutions, the songs sung in struggle, the emblems worn in solidarity. These are not ornaments, they are vessels of meaning. A single imaged fist, a burning candle, a tree planted in barren soil, can tell a story that words cannot capture. They become archetypal bridges, connecting the individual with the collective, the present with the timeless, the personal moment with the eternal movement. For youth, the creation and embrace of symbols is vital. In a world saturated with noise, symbols cut through distraction. They awaken recognition, not only in the mind but in the heart. A symbol whispers, "You are not alone. You belong to something larger. You are part of a story that has been unfolding long before you and will continue long after you." When moments transform into movements, it is often because a symbol has emerged to carry the flame forward. Think of how one photograph can ignite global outrage, how one phrase can echo in countless voices, how one emblem can unify people across languages and borders. Symbols give movements endurance because they live in the imagination, and the imagination is the wellspring of action. But symbols are not only external. They also rise within you. Your dreams, your visions, your inner images. They are personal symbols calling you toward transformation. To pay attention to them, to give them form in art and speech, in action, is to allow your unconscious to speak to the collective. In this way, each youth becomes not only a bearer of symbols but also a creator of them, offering to the world an image that can inspire others into courage. Symbols are bridges because they connect what seems divided, the inner and outer world, the individual and the collective, the moment and the eternal. A movement that learns to embody powerful, soulful symbols becomes unshackable, because it is no longer only an idea. It is a living myth, and myths do not die. They transform and carry their energy forward, guiding humanity toward its next horizon. Individuation is the pathway to collective renewal, because no society can rise beyond the level of consciousness of the individuals who compose it. Jung saw individuation as the sacred process of becoming whole, of reconciling the fragments within us, of uniting the conscious with the unconscious, of integrating both our light and our shadow into a deeper, truer self. This is not merely a private journey, it is the foundation upon which collective transformation is built. A movement is only as authentic, as resilient, as awake as the individuals who embody it. Too often, the temptation of youth is to look outward, to demand change in the world without first confronting the inner divisions of the soul. But the outer world mirrors the inner one. When we carry unacknowledged rage, we reproduce cycles of violence. When we remain fragmented, our movements fracture as well. But when we undertake the hard work of individuation, facing our shadow, listening to our dreams, claiming our full humanity, we bring to the collective a presence that is whole, centered, and unshackable. Individuation does not mean retreating from society into isolation. On the contrary, it means returning to the world as a more conscious being, one who can serve without projecting their wounds onto others, one who can lead without being consumed by ego, one who can fight for justice without becoming an image of the very oppression they resist. Such individuals become the backbone of renewal. They embody what they long for, and by embodying it, they make it possible for others to follow. Youth have a special role here. The world does not simply need your energy or your protest. It needs your wholeness. It needs young men and women who are not afraid to look within, who are willing to reconcile their contradictions, who will refuse to live as half-selves. When you become whole, you no longer move from reaction, you move from vision. You no longer fight against the world in bitterness. You create a new world from a deeper center. This is why individuation is not selfish work, it is service. It is the inner preparation for outer transformation. A generation of individuated youth is a generation that cannot be manipulated by fear, cannot be divided by hatred, cannot be seduced by shallow distractions. Instead, it becomes a generation capable of birthing a new myth for humanity, a story of renewal, of integration, of healing. The collective is always renewed through the courage of individuals who dare to become themselves fully. And in this daring, the planet itself is renewed. For the work of individuation is not only for personal peace, it is for the survival of our shared future. Youth who embrace this path carry the seed of a movement that can heal not only nations, but the soul of humanity itself. So, my friends, the choice is before you to treat your moments as fleeting, or to recognize them as eternal seeds of destiny. Every word you speak, every act of courage you take, every step into authenticity, it all matters. You are not waiting for the future. You are the future being born.